A long, long time ago, before the arrival of humans, approximately 60 million years ago, our planet was ruled by giants we now call dinosaurs. These dinosaurs roamed the Earth for a prolonged period of 180 million years. Scientists have discovered 900 fossils that are linked to different species of dinosaurs. According to estimates, during the peak of the Jurassic period, there were about 400 billion different kinds of dinosaurs on Earth. That's over 40 billion species. The remains or any evidence of animals that lived and died before the arrival of humans is called a fossil. The first fossil was found in Norway, discovered by workers drilling in the Snorri oil field. This fossil was buried 2,250 meters deep beneath the seafloor. Being buried for millions of years inside the ground, it becomes difficult for the fossil to retain its original shape. Most fossils turn into oil, which we process and use as fuel. Often we find bits and pieces of their bones, and if we're lucky, we might even find their skeletons. When we search for dinosaurs on Google, we come across a long list of species, some of whose fossils we have found. By joining these pieces and examining their footprints in various places, assumptions are made about their appearance, walking style, and eating habits. However, we have yet to find a fossil in its original condition, but now we were getting closer. In 2011, a man named Shaun Funk was operating an excavator in a mine in Canada. This 200-foot deep excavation was being done for Suncor's Millennium Mine, located in the Canadian province of Alberta. It was 2:30 p.m., and the excavation work was at its peak. Though the soil was quite soft, which meant the excavator didn't need much pressure, there came a point when it had to exert more force. Initially, Shaun Funk thought it was just a large rock, but when the rock-like object was given a bit more force, Shaun saw a peculiar pattern buried in the ground. A pattern of circles surrounded by dark brown clay. Anyone just like Shaun would have stopped the work to inspect it closely, and that's exactly what Shaun did. He called his chief supervisor, and for the next several hours, all the people working in the mine gathered to look at this unusual object. However, everyone learned the reality when Dr. Donald Henderson from the Royal Tyrrell Museum arrived on the scene. Dr. Donald, who had vast experience with prehistoric fossils, quickly understood that this was the fossil of an animal unknown to mankind. The fossils found earlier in Alberta belonged to plesiosaurs, so Dr. Donald initially believed this fossil could also belong to a plesiosaurus. But he had no idea that the object buried in the ground would change his life forever. Around 80 million years ago, this part of Canada, where the fossil was discovered, was under the deep sea. The plesiosaurs that lived there fell to the ground after dying, which is why this area had many plesiosaur fossils. But was this fossil of a plesiosaur or of some other creature? And most importantly, what did it look like? To uncover the answers, it was crucial to extract it safely. And that task wasn't easy. Excavation experts were hired, and with great care, the excavation process began. The soil was removed from around the fossil, and now it was time to lift it out of the ground. Normally, electric jackhammers are used for this, but they could damage the fossil, so the experts decided to use hydrovacing technology instead. Hydrovacing is a technology that uses high-pressure water jets to cut through objects, and at the same time, an industrial-grade vacuum sucks up the mud and water. Using hydrovacing, the task was completed efficiently and skillfully. Now, the giant rock containing the fossil was separated from the land, and it was time to load it onto the truck. Experts believed they could load it onto the truck using a crane, but everyone was nervous about the risk of a mishap during the loading. Unfortunately, their fears came true. As soon as the crane applied some pressure to lift the fossil, it cracked open. All the people present at the site were stunned. On one hand, the experts were saddened by their lost effort, and on the other, the Royal Tyrrell Museum team felt the disappointment of having the fossil damaged. Although the fossil appeared to be a rock, its center was fragile, unable to withstand the pressure from the crane. However, not all hope was lost. Despite the crack, the fossil was still intact. What was inside it remained to be discovered. The broken pieces of the fossil were packed and sent to the Royal Tyrrell Museum, where an amazing revelation was about to unfold. At this point, no one knew the true nature of the fossil. Due to being buried for millions of years, it was an enormous challenge to separate the fossil from the surrounding rock. But the task had to be done. After 5 years and 7,000 man-hours of painstaking work, when the fossil was finally separated from the rock, what emerged had been hidden for 80 million years. Paleontologists were astonished to find that this fossil was not of a plesiosaurus, but rather of a dinosaur. But the surprise didn't stop there. the fossil was so well preserved that its skin was still intact. This was the only dinosaur in the world found in such an intact condition. Previously, when we found dinosaur fossils, we only discovered bones, which were painstakingly reconstructed in museums. But this fossil was different. It had reddish-brown skin and a full-body armored jacket for self-defense. And apart from that, very little was known about this 3.5-ton dinosaur. Once the paleontologists separated the fossil from the rock, it was time to investigate this unique species. For the first time, researchers were working with a sample that was in its original form. After years of research and hundreds of tests, the results were fascinating. This dinosaur had died 110 million years ago, and at the time of its death, it was eating something. This slow-moving dinosaur was herbivorous, and traces of the plant material it was eating were found preserved in its stomach. This dinosaur lived during the Jurassic period when reptiles ruled the Earth. After their extinction, new animals emerged and began to roam the air, water, and land, including ferocious predators like the T-Rex. About 65 million years ago, a massive meteoroid, 10 times larger than Dubai, struck the Earth. The impact shook the planet, and the resulting destruction was unimaginable. Scientists believe this event marked the end of the dinosaurs. Experts are hopeful that millions of fossils like this one are still buried somewhere in the mountains or beneath the land.